Hello, everybody, and welcome to Hippie Sh. Yay! This is episode 4. And since I am back after a little bit of a break, what better way to reintroduce the podcast than to talk about the very concept of self-development itself? How fun! So, we are honestly going to just dive right in because I don't want this episode to run for too long. So I'm just gonna start off with, I don't know, melting your brains. So if you are, we're really just gonna if you're looking if you're looking at this podcast in the context of like wanting to, I don't know, become like a more successful human or something like that, this may not be the episode for you. But I feel like it's important, and I feel like it needs to be said, and I feel like it is a concept that is not explored very often, and that is a little bit of a disservice. And despite the fact that there's a huge overlap between people that are into spirituality, here we go, and people that are into self-development. Like, you know, if you look at the Venn diagram of that overlap, it's a circle for the most part. And yet, this is where we end up. So, in spirituality, if you're not already familiar, kind of it's seen as like an end goal of spirituality, which is not true. But for people that have not yet gotten to the space where they've had a spiritual awakening, an enlightenment experience, a God experience, for people that have not yet reached that stage of their spiritual development, that kind of seems like the end goal. Like, you will achieve enlightenment and you're done. No. But that's really like a common perception, and I'm going to walk you through the experience of enlightenment in 30 seconds or less, and you are not going to have that enlightenment experience for yourself, but this is basically the mental states that you get to through enlightenment experiences. And that mental state is the realization that you are much greater than you've ever believed, that you as a human are an illusion, in the sense that you are impermanent, you don't last forever, your body will return to the earth, your mind will turn off at some point, you will no longer have feelings, you will no longer own your belongings, and so therefore all of these things, all of these concepts that inform your idea of you are imaginary, not imaginary in the, you know, they're not real. Like, they're definitely real, they're tangible, but that is not you. You are much bigger than that. What that is your ego. And what you actually are is the universe itself. And that is intellectually very simple to grasp, because if you are arguing with me on that, then I will just tell you the universe by definition is all that exists. Therefore, I'm right and you're wrong, and there's nothing you can do about it. But, you know, being able to actually experience that and feel that, like, in your bones, and feel the weight of what that means, feeling that in context of the life that you thought that you were living up until that point, feeling that and feeling your ego screaming at you because the ego does not want to be dissolved in such a way, that is the enlightenment experience. When that idea sinks in, that you are just all, and that the entire foundation that you've built your life on is just kind of this impermanent, illusory, and when we talk about illusion, when we express the idea that reality is an illusion, it doesn't mean, again, it doesn't mean that it's not real. It's very real. It's very, very, very real. And it may be real to you only, or it may be real to a whole bunch of people. But the idea of the illusion is that think of the ocean, which is just this huge body of water, right? This endless, well, it's not endless, just this huge body of water, okay, like the biggest body of water that you can think of. And then you look at a wave. The wave is not separate from the ocean. The wave is part of the ocean. We just categorize the wave in a different way. We describe the wave in a different way. And so the idea of reality being an illusion is that it is like the wave in the ocean. You are a wave in the ocean. And the illusion is that you're somehow separate by virtue that you are taking the form of a wave. So when we talk about reality as an illusion, or your life as an illusion, the ego, as a liar, it is because the ego tells you, no, you're separate. You are you. I am me, Brice, versus maintaining the idea and building a life around the idea that I am so much greater than that, and that me, Brice, has a very limited perspective of what's going on. I'm seeing the rest of the greater self through a very limited perspective, my own human perspective, in the same way that everybody else is. And yet everybody else is also me. Everybody else is also part of the self. We are just, God itself wearing 8 billion different masks and having 8 billion different simultaneous experiences, and contributing to the unfolding of the universe itself in our various ways, by walking our different journeys and paths, and by having our human experiences. And so we have this spiritual awakening, and then we talk about self-development. And so my question for other spiritual people, because this is a question that I've been wrestling with, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm starting to feel like maybe this is just kind of the point of life, and that is, when we talk about self-development after having a spiritual awakening, who the hell are we improving? And that's, I guess, the concept that I wanted to get into today, is who are we improving? Or I guess more so how I think of self-development in the context of being part of a greater whole, in the context of recognizing the illusion itself and yet still needing to live within it, because you don't just you don't have the enlightenment experience and then just kind of dissolve. Life goes on. And for a lot of us, I can speak only for myself, but after I had my God experience, I was basically depressed. I wasn't sad. I felt great. I felt very blissful and very joyful. But I also didn't really do anything for like a week, because it was like, well, it's all meaningless now. And you know, if somebody else accomplishes something, then I also accomplish that thing. And you know, I'm temporary, I am impermanent, and nothing that I do has any long-lasting effects, period. Which is still true, but I didn't know what to do with that information. I didn't know what to do with that feeling. I didn't know how to continue to live a life, because it was like, well, this is all meaningless. You know, until my really wonderful coach at the time told me, well, yeah, it is, and that means that you can give it then any meaning that you want to give it, which is great and liberating, and I wish I had called her sooner so I wouldn't have lost that week. But yeah, it's, you know, you have this direct experience of being so much greater than yourself, and then you're going to talk about self-development, you know, from this egoic perspective. And I wanted to take this episode to explore that idea and then just share how I'm reconciling that idea, because I feel like it may be helpful for some of you that are trying really hard to continue to live a life that actually feels, well, it could end the sentence there, honestly. But, you know, living a life that feels authentic after having an enlightenment experience without just completely, I don't know, dissolving, without, you know, giving up on the human experience itself, because the human experience is sacred. It is to be honored. It is to be had. You are the only person who can have your particular human experience. So it is important that you continue to have it. You're just working on being a little bit more mindful and informed in that process, and kind of surrendering some of the outdated patterns and ideas and beliefs and concepts that aren't going to further your spiritual progress in that process. So let's talk about that. So another, I guess, important concept from spirituality is the answer of why we're here. So considering that we are, you know, just kind of the universe experiencing itself through 8 billion different perspectives at any given moment, there's the question of, okay, well, why? And there's a few answers for that, but the metaphor that I really like, the metaphor that I feel really resonates with me, is you are, you know, a pure white being in a pure white room. How do you have the experience of being a pure white being in a pure white room? How does light experience itself? How does the universe experience itself? And the answer is to divide itself, to split off so that it can experience itself through all these different perspectives. Or, you know, why does life hurt? It's because we are experiencing contrast. So we are pure white beings in a pure white room. The only way to experience that is to add some color, to add some contrast. And so life itself is the contrast. It is the experience of contrast, in the sense that you will walk through life with this limited perspective, seeing the good things, seeing the painful things, choosing to honor them both. And then, you know, eventually your human existence comes to an end and you just kind of re-emerge with the greater consciousness, right? But during that time that you were the color in the universe, you know, got to not only have your experience of contrast, but in doing so, in existing as color and existing as contrast, you are also allowing the rest of the universe to experience you. in that act of existing, you are informing other experiences of contrast. And so the human experience is sacred. It is the only way that the universe can have your particular human experience. And so we do have to honor it. And so this idea, really, it is meant to bring you peace. And then we have this experience, and we, come back and ground that into reality, and it's like, okay, well, now I have to maintain that idea while also living life without turning my back on my life up until this point. And yet now everything that I've ever done feels so meaningless and pointless and purposeless and so disappointing and so inferior compared to, how I could feel if I just could, hold on to that enlightenment experience. And unfortunately, can't. It's, there aren't a lot of people whose egos are so that they can just kind of dissolve and, contemplate death for the rest of their lives. And I mean, ego, a lack of ego, a dissolution of ego, a break in ego is literally the definition of psychosis. So it's not ideal. It's not an ideal state of being. So we have to try to maintain this balance then of trying to maintain your spiritual perspective, trying to maintain your experience, your God experience, your I am universe experience, while also honoring the human experience, the animal experience, the experience that is meant for you, the experience of contrast, knowing at all times that all the contrast that you experience is just informed by your ego, and you could get rid of it if you could only get rid of your ego. And it's a difficult life. that is not something that brings necessarily inner peace at all moments. There's this image of the centaur that is, half human, half animal. And that is an image used to describe a certain stage of egoic development where you try to remember your divine nature while also honoring your human nature. And that's an important space to be in. And I would argue that that's the only space that you can sincerely be in for any significant amount of time. And, time itself is also the illusion, and you can, not going down that rabbit hole in this episode, but, from where I stand, it appears that trying to maintain that divine nature while also maintaining and honoring your particular incarnation, your particular manifestation on this earth is kind of the only way to live a full life. And trying to integrate those very, at times, disparate concepts, those very disparate ideas, is the challenge. That is life. That is what then becomes your goal and your purpose, is walking both of those paths simultaneously and trying to bring those two things into alignment as often as you possibly can. And so when we talk about self-development, right, for me, for where I have gotten in my life, I have to honor contrast. I have to maintain the idea that contrast is sacred. These things that make me feel negative emotions, these things that prompt me, I should say, to feel negative emotions, the idea of feeling lonely, which is, a feeling that I still struggle with, or the feeling of being unlovable in nature, another negative emotion that I struggle with, another of my, core wounds that I struggle with, that my life has seemed to pull into my conscious awareness as it unfolds. These are contrasts. These are experiences of contrast, and they are important. They are mine. These are my experiences to have. They are also my struggle to overcome. They are, the suffering that I need to take responsibility for, that I need to transmute, that I need to surrender, let go of, in order to, feel whole. But they are mine and mine alone. And so when we talk about self-development from a spiritual perspective, in honoring the needs of your human, you are automatically doing justice in the greater context. And that can be very difficult to accept, because so many of us, we recognize that the ego is what limits us. We recognize that the ego is, what informs the illusion. It is the part of us that keeps us so separate from God itself, from the experience of the whole, from bliss. And yet, it is the only thing that allows us to experience contrast. And so it's so necessary. It's so completely necessary. But we also can't live our lives informed only by ego, which is, what we do until we have that spiritual awakening. Or for some of us, many awakenings, until we truly have that direct experience, and until we're ready to really integrate it, until we're really ready to hold that with us and carry that with us, which is a problem unto itself, until we're ready to cling to the idea of not being able to cling to much of anything. Go figure, right? Love being human. But until we're really ready to, reach the stage of ego development where the ego is willing to say, all right, fine, have it your way. I will be the universe and also be me. Until you reach that stage, you are living strictly from ego. And that does cause a lot of suffering. That is why we, reach the end of yet another should. We lose the weight, or we get the degree, or we get the husband, or we start the podcast, or we reach the follower count, or we hit the bank balance that we want, that we think that we want, and then, you get there and you're still unhappy. You're like, well, that wasn't it. What's next, I guess. And then your ego comes up with another what's next, and then you just, keep kind of chasing the carrot. And so what happens when you have an enlightenment experience is that it hits the pause button and just kind of adds context. And that is why it is important. It is important to have that God experience at some point, because it contextualizes the rest of your life up to that point and coming after. But a lot of people don't end up having that experience at all, or they have it very late in life when they've already kind of, burned through a lot of karma, when they've already had, the job, the career, the house, the boat, the car, the vacations, the husband, you've already had all of that, and so you're, getting a lot closer to death, and then you have your spiritual awakening, your enlightenment experience, and it contextualizes your whole life, and then you start to find, a way to actually be in touch with pure bliss during the end of your days, and that's really beautiful, and that's a really wonderful way for life to unfold, and I sometimes wish that my life had unfolded in that way too, but I guess that also kind of leaves me with the question of, like, is there an ideal time to actually experience bliss for the first time? Is it really ideally something that should happen at the end of your life? Is it something that, I wish that people could experience their whole lives? Or, in Kabbalah, for a very long time, you actually weren't allowed to pursue Kabbalah until you were 40 years old, because it was required that you build an actual foundation. You had to struggle. You had to chase the carrot for, 40 years of your life before you were allowed to start to pursue the esoteric, the mystical, the, higher perspectives, the greater perspectives. And sometimes I wonder whether things have happened in my life in the order that they should have, and sometimes I wonder if it was just kind of an accident, and like, well, I'm here now, and whether I was truly ready for that is beyond me to be able to answer. And I know that there's this concept in spirituality that, you aren't handed anything that you're not ready for. And I believe that that's true eventually, but I believe that it takes quite a while to make certain truths true. That's not a good sentence. Let me rephrase that. Sometimes I say something and I'm like, is that profound or was that insanity? And I guess what's the difference? Let me clarify that. So let's talk about my main wound, my demon that I have identified, kind of the chief demon that has ruled a lot of my life and informed so many of my decisions up until this point, and that is the belief that I adopted very, very, very early on in my life that I was unlovable, that at my core I am unlovable. That is the truth that I have been trying to outrun for my entire life. That is the truth that I have been trying to overcompensate for my entire life. And the reason it is here with me is because when I was very, very, very young, I didn't receive the love that a child needs to receive in order to feel lovable. And in my 4-year-old brain, trying to make sense of the senseless, trying to understand why my parents didn't love me in the way that I needed them to, rather than believing, well, my parents are human and they're not always going to be available to me to meet my needs as I have them, rather than recognizing, well, my dad was raised in this way and my mom was raised in this way, and therefore, now this is how they operate. Rather than accepting that, rather than believing that, rather than having that explanation, 4-year-old brain could only come up with creating order out of chaos, that I'm just unlovable. Unless, I can make myself lovable, but inherently I am unlovable. And so now here's my to-do list for all the things that I can do, all the things that I can control, all the actions I can take, all the doing, all the being I can manipulate myself in my interactions with others and how I present myself to the world to trick people into accepting that I am lovable and that I am worthy of love, and I can receive that conditional love then by contorting myself to being and doing what others want of me to make myself palatable. And that has shaped my whole life. And yes, now, at the age of 31, I am capable of understanding that's not true, but that was the truth that I believed and then ran from. That was my truth. Not the truth. It's not true, but it was my truth. But I didn't want to face my truth, and so I started to outrun my truth in that moment. Being 4 years old, I started running from my truth, and I never, stopped until I hit that experience. Until I had the experience of God itself, until I had the experience of being love itself, and therefore inherently being worthy. And so, yes, I was able to handle that eventually. Eventually, my life story was able to unfold in such a way that I could come to terms with the experience that I had so early on. Eventually, I could look back and see that pattern and see how that had played out throughout my entire life. But I was not ready at 4 years old to be unlovable. And that was not the universe presenting itself, coming to me with the truth that I was unlovable, but it was my truth. It was the truth that I got. And life, as I understood it, based off of what a 4-year-old is capable of, yeah, that was, I was presented with these parents, and that was the logical conclusion, was just, well, I must be unlovable then, right? So, was I ready for that? No, of course not. It hurt like a bitch for, 30 years. So, when we talk about self-development, you are always participating in self-development. The self is always developing. The greater self is always developing. Whether you are acting in alignment with your someone's going to experience it. You are creating some form of contrast. When you steal, you're creating contrast for yourself and for the person that you're stealing from. When you are violent, you are creating contrast for yourself and for the person that you're being violent against. When you are deluding yourself, you are creating contrast for yourself and for anybody who is affected by the fallout of your actions. And that's all really self-development. That's all unfolding. When we call things like creating better habits self-development, we're really missing the greater concept of the self. We're really being quite egoic in that. When I say I've been working on myself, and that means that I have been working on feeling my feelings, drinking more water, walking more, doing yoga. When I call that self-development, and I don't call the 31 years of my life that led me to seeing the necessity of doing those things, I don't call that self-development, I am dishonoring my own experience, my human experience. I am dishonoring the very sacred path that I had to walk to get to where I am. And that brings this automatic sense of shame into the world of self-development. And if we learn anything from self-development, it is that shame is not the fuel to achieve good outcomes. And so when I say that I'm working on myself and then I take a day off, and that comes with a sense of shame, when I slip into old patterns, when I slip into old habits, I will feel shame, because then I'm not working on myself, I'm not improving, I'm not doing what I'm supposed to do, versus holding the idea that everything is automatically self-development, because everything is pushing the greater self just a little bit further down the path. You know, we are unfolding in yet another way. It's all just playing out. No matter what, we are always in flow, regardless of how hard we try and swim upstream or jump out. You can't, honestly. And that's, the concept of staying in the flow of life is something that really bothers me in spirituality, because it's like, well, you don't have a choice. You are in the flow. Period. Maybe you don't recognize that you are. Maybe you're trying real hard not to be, but you're always in flow. You just choose whether or not you're going to be conscious about it. That's it. You are just making choices throughout your life, every single day, constantly, of whether you are going to stay conscious about what you're doing or not. That's it. That's really the only thing that you can control. That's the only thing that you choose is, am I going to be conscious in this moment or not? Am I going to honor myself, my experience, my life, my purpose, my part, or not? Am I going to turn my back on it? Am I going to outrun it? And so when we talk about the concept of self-development, I really feel that what we're actually talking about is situational development. I think we're really talking about circumstantial development. I don't drink more water because it's somehow going to improve the universe for me to drink more water. I drink more water because feeling thirsty is uncomfortable, and feeling well hydrated is comfortable for me, because drinking less caffeine throughout the day means that I will get better sleep, and therefore I will feel better in the morning. I can stay more conscious in the morning. I can wake up a little bit earlier and greet the day with a little bit more energy and feel a little bit more present and a little bit more joyful throughout my day. I walk because I honor that my body comes from the earth, and I love every cell of it, and I'm thankful to have it. I'm thankful that my body is here with me, letting me do things, letting me see things, letting me have all of these experiences. And I choose to take care of it because I'm thankful for it. And I do yoga because it brings me a sense of inner peace, and because I believe that following, the 8-limb path is a way to gradually creep my way closer and closer to staying completely present with the God experience over time. I meditate in the morning because it allows me to stay more mindful, more present throughout my day, because it helps to develop my prefrontal cortex and my hippocampus, and my, we make these choices and we call it self-development, and we're really not doing anything special in doing these activities. What we're doing is making choices that will bring us more comfort throughout the process of experiencing contrast. But there's not enough meditation. There's not enough hours in the day for me to do meditation and to do yoga and to do art and to do piano and to do healthy relationships and to do nutritional food and to do walking in order to stop myself from experiencing contrast. What I can do is take some of the edge off of that and to increase the likelihood of me being able to maintain my consciousness throughout the experience of contrast, to keep things in perspective of the larger whole, to find more comfort throughout the experience of contrast. I can make the highs a little bit higher and I can make the lows a little bit higher. I can kind of raise the bar on my overall state of well-being at any given moment, at any given data point throughout my life, by investing in making the choices that will be more nourishing for me, that will honor my experience, that will do justice to myself, that will show me that I am lovable. Or I can choose not to. I can choose otherwise. I can choose to eat a lot of junk food. I can choose to sit on my couch. I can choose to pursue emotionally unavailable men, because that then gives me permission to ignore myself as well. I can choose to outrun the truth of who I am, along with the very misinformed versions of the truth that I've told myself. I can choose to live the rest of my life out of these old patterns, and there's no shame in any of that, because the universe is just a green light. It is saying, yep, go for it. There is no higher power judging, because when you're having your human experience, you are having your human experience. The universe doesn't care what that looks like for you. You're still having it. You are still experiencing contrast or experiencing the light itself. It's just a matter of choosing what you prefer. You can further the unfolding of the universe through fear or through inspiration. That is entirely up to you. And for the most part, we learn through our pain. We learn through our fear. We are terrified of things. We are terrified of outrunning the truth, and so then we manifest opportunities in our lives to experience the evidence of the truth, of the reality that we fear. Believing that I was inherently unlovable for so long meant that I experienced many, many, many times over the evidence of how unlovable I was. I had to take a little bit of a break. I was gonna get a little bit choked up. I have I have experienced in my life so many times the evidence of how unlovable I am. And I had to experience those things in order to find the motivation necessary to stop learning from that pain. 6 months ago, I dedicated myself to no more. I'm not going to learn from pain anymore. I'm going to learn through inspiration. That is what I want. That is what I choose, is to learn from inspiration, to be on fire about life, and to further my life through the pursuit of things that feel good to me, rather than running from myself, rather than trying to get away from myself. I am choosing to love myself fully, to embrace the full range of my experience, to integrate all these parts of myself rather than trying to shut them up and quiet them down. And that is not self-improvement. That is what we call self-improvement. But I'm not improving anything, because everything is already okay as it is. I'm already lovable. I'm not becoming more lovable in my pursuit of inspiration. I am showing myself the love that I deserve already inherently in providing myself more opportunities to learn from inspiration. And so, if you are a person who is interested in self-development, my question for you is whether you are trying to show yourself how much you love yourself by improving your circumstances, by improving your situation, by offering yourself more opportunities to learn from inspiration, by offering yourself a little bit more peace and a little bit more comfort, a little more joy, a little more love along the way, or whether you are using self-development to try and outrun some form of the truth that you told yourself at a very early age to make sense of the senseless. I have a master's degree that I got out of ego, that I got because I thought that, I got my bachelor's degree because I thought that if I were educated, then my dad would love me, and my dad would be proud of me for the first time in my life, which was not true. And then I got my master's degree because I thought that would then make me more educated and therefore smarter than him, and so therefore I would know better, and my opinion of myself would somehow matter more than his. And so I would feel more lovable because I would say, well, I think I'm cool, and I know more than you about business. And then, go figure, I still hated myself. Go figure that didn't work, right? And so, my invitation to you is to start to ask yourself why you're doing the things that you're doing. Because if you're trying to overcompensate from a wounded space, if you're trying to outrun some truth that you told yourself very early as a child, the lasting effects of meeting your goals, of meeting your pursuits, are going to be so limited and so temporary and so transient that it's almost not worth pursuing. In fact, I would argue that it really isn't worth pursuing until you reach the space where you are doing things because they feel good to you, because they feel authentic to you, because they feel aligned, because it feels like you are honoring yourself, because you are honoring your place in this universe because you are showing yourself the love that you believe that you inherently deserve. Don't do anything because you believe that when you do it, you will deserve love. You already deserve love. Act from a space of knowing that you deserve to feel good, and then find the things that feel good and do them because you want to feel good. That is the way to live a spiritual life. That to live upon having an awakening. That is how we honor both our spiritual nature and our human nature, our animal nature. And no matter who you are, no matter where you come from, or what experiences you've had, no matter how much work you've done on yourself, no matter how many times you have given up on yourself, no matter how many painful experiences you've had, no matter who has told you otherwise, you are worthy. You are lovable exactly as you are. You deserve to be accepted exactly as you are, for who you are. And there's nothing that you can do or not do to change that. And it is so incredibly, critically important for you to understand that and to believe that and to let that truth inform your decisions. And if you have spent your life outrunning the story that you are unlovable, the only way to get past that is to face it. You have to recognize what you've taught yourself. You have to sit with that in order to recognize it for what it is. Recognize it for the lie that it is. And I'm not going to tell you that it's going to feel good. When I accepted that I had taught myself to feel unlovable, I mean, I was depressed for like 3 months, okay? Like, it fucking hurts to recognize that. But I had to sit with that. I had to sit with my 4-year-old and say, okay, I understand. I know where that comes from. I know why. I know why that was the explanation that you chose. It makes sense. It's completely valid. And it's also just not true. But you have to accept your truth before you can see the truth. You absolutely have to. You have to recognize what your truth is before you can start to understand the truth itself. So, when we talk about self-development, remember to ask yourself who you are developing. And remember to ask yourself why. Why am I doing this? Is it because it feels good and authentic to me? Or is it because it's another box that I can check to try and, outrun some awful thing that I've told myself? And that doesn't mean that you have to change any of your behaviors. Just notice. Notice why. And if you can sit and notice and observe what you're doing, I believe that the change comes pretty naturally, automatically, as long as you're aware of it. So just, not to leave y'all with, well, just stop doing everything that you're doing and just completely rewrite your brain overnight. No, it's just notice. Ask yourself and notice. And that is very often more than enough to start moving in a direction that feels a little bit better, that feels a little bit more authentic and true. And that feels, again, I could just leave that sentence there, that feels important, that feels joyful. And if you're not there, it's okay. It's okay to not be there. It's okay to continue to live your life from ego. You're not doing a disservice. It just doesn't feel very good. But you can be where you're at. You can be wherever it is that you are, because that's where you're ready to be, and it's okay. You're not dishonoring the universe. You're still part of the great unfolding. You are still love, and you're still worthy of love and acceptance. You're just signing up for things that don't feel very good, and that's valid. Eventually, that will shift when you're ready for it to. Oh, that may have been heavy. This was a very long episode. Alright, I'm going to wrap up here. It's good to be back. If you made it all the way here, you are a trooper. I love y'all so much. I will talk to you all very soon. To this podcast and channel, and God knows where that's going to go from here, but I'm back, and I look forward to seeing how this unfolds in the near future. Have a beautiful day. Have a beautiful day. Have a beautiful day.